Hi, this is Kurt with Friendly DevOps, a channel dedicated to discussing Linux and DevOps related topics. In a previous video, I discussed how I discovered Linux and how it became my daily driver. In today's video, I will be discussing how I became a DevOps engineer. Now, I can say that this process started when I first discovered Linux, but this process, in my opinion, started when I was a teenager, specifically when I just became a teenager at 13. At that time, I was learning how to program for the first time, and the first language I learned was BASIC. Uh, Visual Basic, I started taking that in school, but I was also teaching myself BASIC because I wanted to become a video game programmer, and so I was using an application known as Dark Basic, and this is probably something that most people have never heard of. It was a middleware application that allowed you to import uh, models, textures, and it was also had a method of dynamically generating terrain. I never became a video game developer. In fact, I never went to university. And from that, I always assumed that the skills that I had generated there were probably never going to be put to use. But I had developed a very strong understanding of programming just based on my experience as a teen. It took me about 20 years between the time that I stopped programming to the time that I started applying for DevOps positions. And in between that time, I was still building up my technical skills by doing things that are would be considered unorthodox. Um, well, I was regularly building my own computers. I have never once bought a pre-built computer. I would also soft mod my game consoles or modify my game consoles. I started with the PlayStation 2. I had modified my PlayStation 2 by soldering some components. And I had set up the PlayStation 2 to run games off of a hard drive by buying the or installing the network adapter and putting a hard drive in there. I had soft modded my Wii and Wii U, and I then created a home lab FTP server for all of my videos so that I could watch them on all of my devices through a web browser. So I just kept up with building up my skills. But it wasn't until I discovered Linux that something really took off. After discovering Linux and just finding out that Linux was the base for most web servers around the world, I decided that I wanted to self-host, and so I started finding any way that I could host any application on my own, a web-based application. So I discovered the Matrix backend. I created a Riot Chat instance. I also created a Jitsi teleconference instance as well. The biggest issue for me was not actually learning these abilities. The biggest issue for me is that as an individual, you have very little requirements. And so I was finding it hard to find ways to expand and other projects to utilize. So I was part of an organization called the Workers' Action Movement, and I actually approached them that and offered them my skills and the ability for me to set up a communication server for them. And I was so enthused and wanted to pursue this that I volunteered to pay for all of the resources. So I paid for the web hosting for these web servers that we were going to deploy. Up until this point, this was just a hobby. This was just a way of pursuing my fascination with Linux. And it wasn't until 2020, when the COVID and the lockdown happened, that I decided that I was going to switch my careers, because at that point I was working in construction and the pay was rather reasonable, and it actually provided a great work-life balance. I worked 4 days a week, so I wasn't in a rush to switch careers. But when the lockdowns happened and the only people working were in IT, I decided at that point that I was going to switch careers because I wasn't aware of how long it was going to take before everything opened back up. My initial intention was to become a Linux systems administrator, but upon doing my research, I found quickly that Linux systems administrators were few and far between and not in great demand. And I had found that DevOps engineers had taken up that place. And so I went about finding out what was required of it and quickly learned that a large portion of it was to understand programming. It was a movement to merge programming with system administration. And so I started a couple projects. I'll probably go over my first project, but I'm not going to go in detail about it. What it ultimately was is Jitsi Meets has a way of live streaming to Google or YouTube called Jacoco, and that will only stream set it, and that is only set up to stream to YouTube. But a couple individuals on the Jitsi forums found a way to put in an RTM server, an Nginx RTM server, to bypass that so that you can stream, multi-stream to whatever location that you want. And so the configuration for that Nginx RTM stream is based on the server itself. And so I created a full stack application that would allow me to modify that configuration file and then restart the Nginx instance in order to dynamically change the endpoints with which I was streaming. This is why I say the process for me becoming a DevOps engineer started when I was 13, because the program I had created was in JavaScript, a language I had never seen before, but I had already understood the fundamentals of programming, and it actually only took me 2 weeks for me to architect and develop this full stack application. From there, I moved on to getting my Linux Systems Administration certification. I got that through the Linux Foundation cert that I would not really suggest people get, because even though the Linux Foundation sets the standards for Linux and manages the kernel, many of its certs are not widely recognized. Instead, I would recommend pursuing the Red Hat Certified System Administrator certification because that's more widely recognized, and that's something I'm currently working on myself. From there, I created my resume, created my GitHub portfolio, and applied to a couple jobs. Took me about 3 months from being certified to me getting my first offer with my current employer. The whole timeline from me installing Linux on this device to becoming a DevOps engineer gainfully employed was 2 years almost to the day. And I'm one of those unicorns that people talk about, in the sense that I had zero professional experience in IT before becoming a DevOps engineer, and the first role that I was able to get, I landed a 6-figure job. Now, the standards today are significantly higher, and the likelihood of me being able to repeat such a feat is very much diminished, but I was very lucky and I'm thankful to be where I am. I've been doing my job for the last 4 years, and I've been doing it well. In that time, I've received a promotion to a senior DevOps engineer, and I feel there's a lot more opportunities left for me in my career. I hope my story brought some enjoyment to the people watching at the very least. And if you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned. Peace.